Welcome to week 5 of our 100-day journey in submission and prayer before the Lord. Glad that you joined us today. One of the most famous stories in the Old Testament is the story of Moses and his leadership of the people of Israel out of bondage at the hands of the Egyptians. A passage that you're quite familiar with takes place maybe in a setting somewhere like this, in a wilderness where Moses had been tending his father-in-law's sheep. And you know the story of how an angel appears before Moses in a burning bush. I could have set that on fire, but chose not to destroy the local farm here. But the curiosity of that burning bush, and yet it wasn't burning up, compelled Moses to draw near. And as Moses came near to the fire, God spoke to him from the fire. And I can't read all of Exodus chapter 3 for you today. I'll encourage you to do that in your devotional time this week. But I want to read a couple of segments of Scripture. In verse 7, the Lord said, "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey." Verse 10, "So now go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." And in verse 12, God said, "I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." And finally, in verse 14, God said to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you." First piece of advice I think from this scripture is when we notice God doing something, even if it's something odd, maybe it's time for us to draw near and see what it is that God has going on. And in that experience, He in fact may speak to us. Second thing I note from this scripture, the right answer when God speaks to us is simply, "Here I am." Moses responded to God, "Here I am." God may be calling you to something today, and your response and my response needs to be, "Here I am." And I note that today you may be watching this on Easter or shortly after. And Easter is that time where we celebrate the ultimate rescue of God, when He sent His very Son to die on a cross for us. And through His death and His resurrection, which we today and this week celebrate, we celebrate that rescue, that deliverance, that ultimate freedom from death and destruction and sin, the way to the Father that Jesus made possible. So just as Moses rescued the children of Israel, God still rescues today. He rescues us from our difficulties, and ultimately He rescues us from ourselves and our sin problem. You know, God spoke to Moses, and He called Moses to be an agent of deliverance. And I wonder, is God calling you? Is He calling me? Is He calling Point University to be an agent of deliverance to the world today? Is there someone specific in your life that God may be calling you to speak to that person about Jesus, that they might find the deliverance and rescuing ultimately from the Lord? So as we continue our 100-day journey of surrender and prayer, I pray that God will remove our pride, that we would continue to submit and surrender to Him, and to be willing to obey and be His agents of deliverance wherever He calls us. God bless you.